Brilliant. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it. This is the second series in a series of talks for Open House London. I'm here with my colleague, Christopher. Give us a wave, Christopher. We're both the team behind We Design Homes, a new platform to the market that looks to connect enthusiastic homeowners like yourself to fantastic architects like Cousins and Cousins, who we have here today. Welcome, Cousins and Cousins. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Very well, thanks. Yeah.
Good. Do you want to quickly introduce yourselves to the audience?
I'm Ben Cousins.
I'm Jelena Cousins.
And we have a really original name, Cousins and Cousins. Our name is across the door, and we are husband and wife and business partners. And yeah, so
we're a practice of about 20 people, so it's not just the two of us.
Yeah,
amazing people that are working with us too. So, yeah.
Fantastic. I just want to give everyone just a quick sort of 3-dot point understanding of why we've undertaken to do this series. First of all, obviously we want to promote We Design Homes, which, as Dean mentioned, is a platform that seeks to connect potential clients with really good design-led residential architects such as Ben and Jelena tonight. Second of all, we want to promote practices like Cousins and Cousins, and you know, one of the things that we believe in is that there's not enough good design in the world, and if you're thinking of commissioning an architect, then we absolutely want to encourage you to do so. And the third thing when it comes to these talks is to really give the audience, particularly if you are interested in commissioning an architect to do an extension, refurbishment or a new build, an understanding of the process, such that you might sort of be a little bit more enlightened and perhaps a little bit more engaged about what to expect once you get into designing and building your home or extension. So that's really what we're about tonight. This, as Dean said, this is the second in the series. We have 2 more next Tuesday and next Thursday evening as well. So we might just kick it over to you, Ben and Jelena, to kick us off.
great, thanks. Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen, and then I've got a presentation to run through.
If anyone's got any questions or anything throughout the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screens, and then we can see if we can weave them in as the conversation goes through, or we can raise them at the end. So thank you. Over to you, Ben.
Good. Pleasure, thanks. Hi everyone. So yeah, as we said, we're Cousins and Cousins. We've been going for about 8 years now, and we have been doing a mixture of quite interesting projects over that period, predominantly residential projects, but also been doing quite a lot of commercial work as well more recently. I'm not going to focus on any of the commercial work this evening. We're going to just talk about a few projects that we've been working on, and want to give you a bit of an overview of the type of range of projects we've been doing, and there's a snapshot of some of them here. And then to focus on one particular project that I think would be interesting as a mini case study, which is a low energy retrofit residential project we did in Islington a couple of years ago. So there is a number of words, I guess, that describe elements of what we do, and just thinking about the brief that Dean sent me or us about the notion of rediscovering the home and what that might mean, and I thought I would use a series of words that we use within the practice to be the kind of the vehicle to explain the projects, and the words are quite used extensively by a number of people, but they actually mean quite a lot to us. And it's a good way just to kind of help us navigate through some of the projects that we're going to talk about. So the first one, kind of the idea of craft, and it's quite a popular word, but for us, craft is a really important aspect of what we do. And we felt that it's kind of typified by this particular object that I was given when I worked at Hopkins about, crikey, 15, 20 years ago now, a long time. And it was by a joinery company gave it to us, and he asked how it was made, and we were quite baffled by this, and it took quite a long time to figure out how it was made. But it also is an interesting object because it kind of symbolises in a way the practice, and particularly the way Jelena and I work, is two quite dissimilar elements, and we have very complementary but different skill sets within the business. And they're kind of really interestingly, beautifully crafted and jointed together, and there's something quite seamless about it. And the effect of it is really elegant. So it's a kind of, it's a bit of a metaphor for our business and our practice and the way we work. It's possibly slightly cheesy, but I'm going to come back to this at the end and just to ask a question about how it's made. And if anyone's got any ideas, do post them now. But it's actually quite clever and simple, but the effect of it's really elegant, and it's about kind of making stuff, and that's what we love to do. And we love to think about the detail and how things go together. And it's the synergy between Jelena's creativity and my experience of detailing and construction and knowledge and managing, I think is really important, and it ends in the results that we have in the buildings. So kind of flipping through the next word, detail, you can see here that detail to us is really, really critical. And I think this picture typifies the type of quality of the design that we like to achieve. And you can see the shadow lines lining through vertically, horizontally on all the planes here. And this is a project we did where we've pared back the materials to very few number, one boardmark concrete, and that's a structural element within the building. And all the floors and walls are, and the staircase, it cantilevers off these elements, and the flush doors next to it and the alignment of the ceiling. It's incredibly difficult to achieve that level of precision on a project. So working with really skilled builders and craftspeople is really important to us to achieve this look. And the detail follows through in other elements of the work we do. The picture on the left is a bathroom with the use of marble extensively throughout the bathroom, and the basin is honed from a piece of marble. And the quality of that is the same house to the right here with the feature staircase running through. Again, very pared back, simple materials, kind of an honesty to materiality. So the notion of kind of form follows function, that is a bit of an old-fashioned one in some respects, but it's something that is stuck with me from my Hopkins days. And the material needs to read with the function that it has, and there's an honesty to that. This is the Highgate Kimberley House in Highgate. We finished a couple of years ago as well. Just another view of the concrete, the precision of the detailing, and the way that all the materials kind of come together. Sorry, we've just lost the page here.
First technical problem of the day.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to...
Could be more embarrassing, but there you go.
Right. Okay. So just following on, same house, Kimberley House, and the alignment details, planes, materials. The fireplace on the right is the travertine wall, and that aligns with the boardmark concrete to the right. So just very simple palette materials, and the other details we have in here: polished plaster ceiling. The view through to the ceiling, to the garden at the back as well. Quite important view, axial view through the house. The cantilever staircase on this particular project is a structural element that's fixed off the boardmark concrete wall.
But it also it shows the playfulness of what you can do in a building with having voids and bridges in between two sides of the building. So it's bringing light and concentrating on how that would all work together with detail and spaces that you form with this.
Design is at the forefront of absolutely everything we do, and we take design very seriously, and everything we want to produce needs to function aesthetically as well as practically. And for us, the interior and the exterior of buildings are inextricably linked. We design often with the furniture layout in mind from the beginning, but with a three-dimensional notion of what the space would be like around it. So there's so many elements that form part of that process, but we're trying to capture light. We're trying to capture an aesthetic and an honesty to the material that we're using. We'll come onto this project a little bit more with one of the other words, but the design element of everything we do is really critical. This is the back of the Kimberley House in Highgate. We've tried to bring in as much light to the rear of the property. It's very different to the front. You can see the house, the kind of vernacular style of the properties all around. yet we managed to get planning permission for something which is uncompromisingly modern. The front of this is actually very different to the rear, and the front is a nod to the more traditional forms in the street, but the back is unashamedly modern, and it creates these amazing vistas across the back gardens of this particular house. We've introduced quite a lot of shading to the rear of this property with the screens. We've actually since then introduced a lot more screens, so there's a lot more of this kind of filtering of layers through the back of the building. It's a joy to be in this house. It's just, as you'll see on some of the other images, the views out the back are incredible, and you really get a sense of light and airiness within the building. This is a section through that particular house. You can see the concrete, bulwark concrete running through the house. This is a structural element that supports all the floors and allows the bridges and the cantilevers to come from it. So using materials that have a tactility and an elegance in a very structural form. There's nothing applied here like you might find with an interior design job that is separated from the architecture. So the two are absolutely interlinked, and that's really important to us.
Do you find that a difficult thing to do, or do you feel like it's something that comes quite naturally to you as an architect, designer?
Yeah, it comes pretty naturally. I mean, I think we think about that from day one. So if we're thinking about the materiality of a space, we'll try and blend the structural properties of that within and the kind of visual properties together and the finishes. So that bulwark concrete wall, go back one, is a perfect example of where something that you could apply just almost like a fake skin of concrete or some a panel to that wall, but instead in this instance we're using it structurally to actually support the building. So just going back to the notion of honesty again, and that's kind of something that's really important to the work we do.
Nice.
This is a project we did many years ago, actually, in Islington, and a listed building. It was quite badly altered internally, so it gave us the opportunity to do further works to it. And we dug the garden out and created a subterranean level, and then connected the house with a interesting feature staircase. It replaced a non-original staircase within the space, and overcame the problem of how you connect dissimilar levels, but whilst allowing light into the basement. You can see the void to the right here is planted down to the basement level, bringing light deep into the plan of the basement. This project in Lewisham, it was the refurb of a motorcycle maintenance garage that joined the main railway line, so just to the right hand side here. And there were all sorts of problems with noise, and we needed to overcome that. So one of the simple ideas here was to create a long axial view through and route through the property with a new structural concrete wall, again in this instance, that allowed the staircase to be separated from the living accommodation, which is on the left hand side block. So we're creating this big void through the site. So there's a visual buffer to the staircase to the railway line on the right hand side, and to separating the noise of the railway line from the living accommodation and the bedroom accommodation at this level. And I think you get the sense of that within this space here, and allowing the light in. So this was a very narrow, thin site, and the view from the front door where we're standing now takes your eye all the way through to the back of the garden, which we're standing in on the left-hand image, looking back at the building. We'll hope to build this at some point. It would be amazing. And we're looking at some quite interesting modern methods of construction for this as well, prefabricated units where we can. This is a different type of project, but in terms of its resi, but it's multi-unit resi. This is a grade 2-star manor house in Banstead in Surrey, and we had permission last year to build 35 houses, units, I guess. Some of them are within the existing building. It's currently a hospital, and developers are looking to turn it into apartments within here. And then within the grounds, we have permission for, I think, about 20 individual houses. So within the original garden of the house, where we're trying to make the topology of this particular building not feel like a traditional house. So maybe aligned with possibly like an arms house or something like that, where you've got a much smaller, repetitive design type that sits in keeping with the garden and responds positively to the manor house. And then there's the kitchen wall garden behind, which has another series of houses, and those are a different typology altogether, much more aligned with maybe the barn type that would have been found in the area. So with the kind of hierarchy of architectural styles within this space is really important. And just moving on, this is a project, another listed building in St John's Wood that we've just started on site. Beautiful Grade 2 listed house, and the idea for this one is to do something very lightweight, light touch to the rear, to respect the provenance of the original building as much as we can, and to put a lightweight glass extension on, and then to put a basement in underneath it. So we're putting a new basement underneath the entire footprint of a listed house. In terms of planning, it's quite a challenge to have that approved through Westminster. We obtained planning last year. With its Grade 2 status, everything has to be done very sensitively. So we have to, this is a restoration project as well as a new build project for the basement underneath. And again, light is really key. We're trying to, this is a kind of a dance studio, yoga studio down here, gym. And we've got a thin bridge of a walk-on glazed element here, which allows light deep into the plan. This is a project that we'll be starting on site hopefully next year, and it's in Hampstead Lane, but actually in Highgate. And it's a really interesting project for the fact that it's in a very traditional area. It's a kind of arts and crafts typology within the existing area. And the replacement house that we were looking to demolish was not of a particularly good architectural quality. So the argument was much easier to make about the replacement being of a higher architectural quality to obtain permission. And this is a play on a traditional Edwardian or arts and crafts style building. And we've just rotated the pitched roof around, and we've altered a series of forms to be much more playful with the final building type.
Very nice.
So light is also something that's really important to every project, and particularly in this country where, although recently we've had lots of it, but historically there's not been a huge amount of light, certainly in the winter season. Yellen is from Croatia, and she kind of craves the light, and she's always quite depressed by the winters that we have here.
No, tell me about it.
I know how you feel. I know how you feel. Trust me.
Indeed, yeah.
I'll show you our glass roof when we come back on, so you can see what we're sitting under.
Yeah.
The only way I could do it.
Indeed, absolutely.
But it has such an impact on our well-being now, especially with more people being at home and stuff like that. It's good to have that already ingrained in what you do.
Nothing nicer to feel that you're outside, you know.
Yeah.
Nothing nicer, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So any opportunity to bring light in is really important to us. So the connection with nature, that actual view through the house from the front door to orientate yourself, or if you're within a particular space like this, extension to a house in Hackney we did a few years ago, where you're within the garden, you're within nature. And this is before they actually refurbished the garden as well. We did the garden, but you get the sense of being outside. Even in this instance, even though you're maybe 2 foot up from the garden level, you still have that connection. It was an interesting project actually, because it got a lot of attention, and we did this. We weren't sure about the design, and in elevation it could be perceived to be looking quite awkward, but actually there's something really simple and elegant about it, and it works incredibly well within the space. So we're quite happy about that. And the clients are absolutely delighted. And one thing that they said was that I think they couldn't have imagined this type of space that could have existed. I think, can you remember what we said exactly? Something along those lines. It was something, really kind of heartfelt. And we took quite a lot of persuasion to convince them that this was the right approach. And we were really set in our mind that this idea of having a glazed corner, this really simple idea, with a table in it, would be something that would have such a dramatic effect on the way they live. Light again. So this is the project in over on the left-hand side, well, both projects, both images actually, with the glulam double height space with a feature staircase that runs through the building. The staircase here was the key to unlocking the whole plan. We replaced the staircase throughout the whole building with this quite interesting, elegant metal staircase, and it completely unlocked the plan. So this is the view from the front door. We've purposely left the slats open so that the risers are clear, and you see through to the garden, again trying to bring in light. Project. So basements, we could talk all day about basements as a subsection, but it's I think they need to feel at the very worst like a lower ground floor. And ideally, you shouldn't feel at all like you're in a basement. So this isn't a basement. We are, what, 4 or 5 meters down at this point, but because of the connection with outside of the big light well, the double height void, the staircase descending, we have this really interesting guillotine glaze system, which you can just see the horizontal line off here, and it's in 3 sections that open and close, so they come into the middle and you can walk through. And there's the inside-outside double height, double width void, so your eyes drawn through the space, just helping with that idea of bringing the light into the basement and making it feel as less like a basement as possible. A couple of other projects, one on the left in St John's Wood, just a simple idea of trying to maximize the amount of light that comes into the kitchen by having a very long, thin roof light. And there's no Photoshop in here. There isn't the cross member. This is actually how we managed to achieve this. So we're really pleased with the design of this. And the one on the right is a double height, or actually triple height void for a project we did in Notting Hill a couple of years ago. And we're standing at the bridge on the first floor looking down to the basement, and this is a void that runs through from inside to out. Again, it's trying to maximize that view through to the outside, the connection with the light that comes into the building. A really simple way to achieve light in a plan. It's quite difficult to achieve building control consent for this, and you see it quite a lot. And the original crystal screens don't have a fire certificate for this type of arrangement. So you need to do quite a lot of adaptation to it to get approval for this type of and testing for this type of design. There may well be systems on the market now that actually have fire testing for this particular arrangement, but at the time of the project it didn't exist. So we had to do quite a lot of work to get this approved by building control. But the effect I think is great, and you do see quite a lot now. We did this many years ago now, so it was, you know, and I'm glad that particular idea has been adopted by others as well. Well-being. Now, this is a really interesting word. It's obviously used extensively at the moment and it has so much meaning. And I think it's really important in the home to think about well-being, particularly in a kind of post-COVID world, and what that means to people. And if people are spending more time in their environment within the house and working from home, what is it about the house and the home that's important that helps nurture well-being? And it's something that's always part of the work we do, because I think that's fundamental to people's enjoyment of their own homes, and we do that with our own houses. And I think there's the thing about, I guess, the way that Ellen and I work with private clients is there's an empathy with us being husband and wife, dealing in the main with other couples with children, and understanding their needs and having that level of empathy. So the kind of notion of well-being is at the forefront of everything we do on every level, from your children's well-being to your dog's well-being to, you name it, you know, your own personal kind of man cave or whatever it needs to be. It needs to be considered. This is the project we did in Islington that we're going to do the case study on in a moment. And it was a really interesting exercise because it was entirely about well-being and the restoration of an old house and bringing it back to its original condition, but trying to get as close to the passive house principles that you can achieve on an existing property. We'll talk about this in a bit, but it was a really fascinating project. And then working from home is really important. You know, how do we? It's going to become, as we've seen in the inquiries we've had in the last few months, the idea of needing to work from home and having proper places that are dedicated for working is going to be really important. You can shut the doors, you're not disturbed. We get really fast broadband. There's proper light. There's everything set up as you need to. It's really important that that's considered. Again, this is the project in Hackney with the view out, well-being, connection to nature. We all need to be able to see greenery around us and light and the sky. Another home office that works really well, trying to just make a small space really functional, positioning at the front of the house with the existing window. And then the kind of adaptation of spaces. So this has become a yoga studio, and it functions really well. It could even be a bedroom, and the client runs yoga classes from here. So it's about having that flexibility within the home space that could be used as an office as well as a home or a workplace. And I think there's quite a key kind of buzzwords floating around at the moment, but flexibility is absolutely one of them, and allowing properties to adapt and evolve over time, and not necessarily kind of boxing yourself into a corner long term with how projects are planned.
Do you feel like that's becoming more of a priority now in the recent commissions you've had?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, flexibility and well-being are kind of top of people's agendas. And I think the whole, I mean, this has been widely kind of reported, but the whole of the COVID period has kind of fast-tracked something that would have happened, that taken much longer to have occurred. So I think things that might have happened in 3 or 4 years' time is something being forced to happen in a year. So the trends were definitely moving towards this type of work anyway. And we see that in the office fit-out work that we do in the flexible office environment. It's exactly the same. Everything's just been fast-forwarded massively. This is a nice view of the back garden. So this is the project in Highgate that we mentioned earlier. The view out to the garden there. There's really, very private. So, you don't really need to draw your curtains in this environment. Sustainability is obviously key. We take it very seriously. The first part of the briefing process is to find out about the opportunities and how far the clients would like to go with low energy technology, sustainable technologies, low carbon considerations for their building. This particular one in de Beauvoir, we looked at various methods, but I think the key thing for this one was the choice of material, the glulam timber, and the effect that also has on the visual aesthetic appeal. So if this was done in steel, for instance, this is obviously a much higher carbon footprint with steel to begin with, and the steel would have to be insulated, would have to be wrapped, it would have to be thermally broken. We'd then have to clad it with a finishing material, and the whole build-up would have been, I don't know, way, way bigger than what we've ended up with, which is a solid glulam beam. And that goes through from inside to out, which you can see here in the glazing is fixed to the inside of that. So we were concerned about condensation, as you might be. We employed a company called Inhabit, who we worked with on a number of projects to run some dew point calculations to prove that there wouldn't be any condensation build up on the inside of the timber, and it proved categorically there wouldn't be any. We were quite prepared to put some insulation in the inside, but we were actually delighted that we didn't need to. And it just proves that with a bit of kind of careful consideration, speaking to the right people, you can achieve something which is really elegant, and the kind of strength to weight ratio you get with this type of product ends up being a much better solution than it would have been if it was steel. So
did the client take much convincing? No, they were absolutely up for it. Yeah, I mean, we presented all the options. In terms of cost, actually, I'm trying to remind myself whether it was more. I think the timber itself is probably a little bit more expensive than the steel, but by the time that you've clad the steel, insulated it, wrapped it, thermally broken it, and all the rest of it, and the trays and the program associated with that, I think there's probably. I have to say I don't know, but just kind of anecdotally, it feels like it would be at least as expensive, or would be more expensive than a steel solution, possibly even cheaper. This whole frame went up incredibly quickly. I think within a few hours they arrived. It was craned in, and then that's it. It's done. You then fit the glass. So modern methods of construction is something that we really enjoy working on where we can. And then a very different type of project, the one in Islington that we're going to just talk about with a case study in a moment. And this is trying to get a building as close to passive house principles as possible, using passive house principles to try and create a low energy building, but without any compromise to the quality of the interior. So there was an exercise here of taking all of the original cornices and moldings and window shutters, stripping it off entirely, and then putting it back as a facsimile, preserving the provenance of the original building, and then introducing modern elements around it. The original fireplace was not of the period, so we put something which was more in keeping. We've got these really nice bookcases which are set into the original alcoves. All of the the ventilation system in this particular project is all hidden. So all the grills are hidden within the detailing around the top of the cupboards.
and it's a very thermally efficient building, and we have a mechanical ventilation system which just provides trickle ventilation, and it works really well. And that kind of leads me on to the case study, and I wouldn't mind just talking for 5 minutes about a little bit more detail about this particular project, which we're calling Visibly Green. And it is a fairly typical Islington property. It's a very beautiful, handsome house, and it was in a pretty poor state of repair, and it needed a lot of work. And the clients were very forward-thinking in their vision for how this should be refurbished. And they were driving the sustainability angle much more than we were. So we were obviously keen to introduce as much as we could, but they were really driving it. So I think the success of this was a very informed client who really wanted to do something different and unique. And just a kind of statement from them, which we use now and again, about kind of modernizing the house whilst maintaining the kind of provenance and the heritage and the feel of the house. And they're saying it feels classically Victorian, but consumes a fraction of the energy that it originally did, which I think is a real testament to the whole team and the successes of the project. So, just thinking about how a house leaks heat and where the problems are, which we kind of all know about, but it's in a Victorian traditional terraced house like that, it's like, what do you do? I think if you're going to be doing a really extensive refurbishment, and to the point where you're looking to replace walls, ceilings and floors, and you're altering things, moving walls around, you have the opportunity then to go one step further and think about stripping it out entirely and wrapping the inside of the house and then super insulating it and making it really thermally efficient and airtight. So this is pictures of the existing house that you see here. So some of the features we replicated and retained. All of the window shutters were taken off, and we reused where we could. Where they couldn't be reused, we made replicas of them, but we brought the whole wall forward. So all of the shutters were brought forward to the new position, so we could insulate behind them and put all new windows in, and we wrapped all of the windows. Now this is in a conservation area, so we had very strict requirements on what we could and couldn't do. So all the windows at the front we got permission for double glazing, but they had to be a particular type of very, very slender double glazing from a company called Histoglass. And the beauty of those glasses, the glass panels, is they're all hand blown. So you get the wavy effect of the original windows that you don't get with modern double glazed units. So each one is a hand-blown cylinder glass that is individual panes. So you still get that nice view that you can only achieve with the old original glazed elements, but yet they perform much better than single glazed windows. I won't go into too much detail in here, but we did a lot of analysis with Inhabit that we work with on a number of jobs to look at the kind of fabric first principles of construction. So that was really, there were three kind of principal and tenets of what we were looking to do. One with within the fabric, reducing the thermal bridging, super insulating the inside of the house, and providing an airtight internal wrap that meant that there was no escape of any air. And then you control that by putting really energy efficient systems within there for heating, ventilation, lighting systems. So there's a mechanical ventilation heat recovery system that's put throughout the house. And then you saw the details of some of the locations where we've hidden them, and in some of the early photos, all the grills that were hidden behind joinery. So it looks like a normal refurbishment, but it performs incredibly well. And this is a section through just describing where we insulated. So we super insulated the inside and then introduced the ventilation system. We had quite a traditional conservatory to the rear, so we had to work with the conservatory company to adapt their standard details. And then the other thing that we introduced is solar thermal heating on the roof as well. So there's kind of, that was the principle of the building refurbishment. You can see here from some of the details that we're showing in a little bit more clarity how we've gone about achieving some of the upgrades. So the yellow elements of the insulation, the red elements are the structural thermal breaks that we have between steel beams and existing structure. And you can see in instances like this where we have the structural blocks that are thermally broken. And everything's wrapped, so all the windows are sealed and wrapped. and it creates for a very airtight and thermally efficient envelope. You can see the detail at this point here, which is a product called Insula that separates the steel that's fixed to the floor from the steel that's supporting the house above. So that's a thermal break. So note that if you reduce all of the connection, the cold bridging of the house to the outside, and you almost creating like a box in a box within the existing property, you go as far as you can within an existing setting to improving the thermal performance of that house. And there's a standard for existing refurbs called Enefit that is applicable to this type of property. And the passive house principles are really only applicable for new builds, but where there's a retrofit, the Enefit standard comes in. And it's pretty hard to achieve. And we unfortunately didn't get the Enefit standard because of a couple of compromises that the client was willing to accept, primarily around the need for the windows and upgrading of the windows, that the performance of those existing windows didn't match the requirements of the Enefit standard because of the conditions placed upon us by the conservation area. And also visually, you can't get, from what I can see, maybe it's changed now, but I can't seem to find really good kind of double or triple glazed windows that that perform well and look like the original kind of Georgian windows that you would have in these buildings. So there's a bit of a compromise there. We could have put secondary glazing in, but they didn't want to do that. So we didn't achieve some aspects of the Enefit standard that would have meant that we could have kind of got the badge. But it still, in terms of performance, it performs incredibly well. And we have some statistics where I think an average leaky Victorian house has a kind of an energy use of about 300 kilowatts per hour meters squared annually. And this house achieves 50. So these are numbers that I guess don't really mean anything in real time. But what that actually means is your energy bills are reduced considerably from the interventions that we're putting in here. So
another thing that also achieves is the real tranquility within the house. It gives you the air, the quality. It's quite different.
It's very calm, isn't it?
Very calm, yeah.
It's true. It's actually really, and also there's a filtration system that's put on the air conditioning, the ventilation system that filters the air. So there's an air purifying aspect to this as well, and the quality of the space, the calmness, and it's something really that the clients noted when we finished the job. It's just how kind of tranquil it feels in the house, which is interesting. That was, I mean, we knew it would feel in some ways that way, but that was a kind of nice surprise, I think, to everybody.
I suppose it's very rare that someone experiences a house that is passive house standards in a kind of Victorian kind of setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's passive house principles in a Victorian setting. That's exactly right. And we wouldn't obviously achieve that, the kind of level of airtightness that's required for a passive house in this setting, but we've gone as far as we can with it, and the clients are absolutely delighted with it, and their energy bills are much less. The kind of tranquility and calmness that the installations afford are really, really, really good. So just a couple of finished photos of that house that we can run through, and a couple more. So to kind of respecting the styling of the original property, working with it, the kind of notion of kind of respecting the provenance is really important where we can. Some of the projects where clients want to, and there's nothing original in the house, we just empty the whole house out completely and we start again, as you've seen on some of the earlier projects. But where required, we can be very sensitive about working with the existing property.
It almost looks more Victorian than it started off with.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. So just a plan, just of the low ground floor plan here. You can see this is the existing house, and a lot of small spaces. The staircase came through into this very difficult corridor area. The kitchen was tiny. The connection with the garden was non-existent. So we removed that wall through here, changed the orientation of the staircase, and opened up the kitchen area, and created the living areas to this side here, and it suddenly transformed the whole plan form and works incredibly well. And that's the downstairs living space, the conservatory to the rear. And so going back to the object at the beginning of the presentation, this is how it's made. This is the joint that I showed, and it slides in diagonally. If anyone might have guessed that. It took me a long while to work it out, but I think it's it's a fun little thing to end on. So that's it, and this is us. A couple of years ago at a Christmas party that we held.
Pre-COVID, there's no social.
Yeah, COVID.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for that.
Pleasure. Shall I stop sharing? Would that be things to do now?
Yeah.
Great. Now, just while Dean's having a look at some questions there that are coming from our audience, I've got one question to get you started, and I apologise in advance because this is a practical question. It's the sort of question that my father would ask, if I'm honest.
Go for it.
All of that glazing that lets in all of that beautiful British light, do you design for access in terms of cleaning it? I can just see my dad looking at some of those pictures going, yes, but how do you get up there to clean the glass?
You do. You have to. You absolutely have to as part of your access strategy and your CDM requirements. So as part of the process of going through, you have to think about access maintenance, safety from day one. So the glass is usually where it's horizontal is designed. If not full loading, it's designed for maintenance loading, and so it's easy to walk on, to maintain, to clean the leaves off, etc.
Excellent. I bet you I'm not the only person watching your presentation today who thought to ask that question.
Can I show you our one?
Yes, please.
Whoops.
Who climbs up there?
I climb up there actually. I do all maintenance of that. So yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's not quite Croatia, Elena, but I understand exactly what you mean.
I'm getting this. This summer definitely was pretty close to it, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got Jonathan Menny, I think. Sorry, Jonathan, if I said that wrong. He said the finishes you've achieved, the energy efficiency upgrades to the Islington house are fantastic. He said, I'm sure there's plenty of big houses in London and beyond that would benefit from similar work. But he said, for those people that don't have kind of significant budgets or are looking to, spend lots of money on their homes, do you have any tips that they could really focus in on for upgrading their own homes without spending a huge amount?
I think absolutely from an environmental perspective, there are things that can be done. I think changing windows where possible and putting double glazing in is a really easy first step. I think you have to think about the principles of the fabric first approach to all upgrades of any kind, any refurbishment. So if there's an opportunity to put more insulation in the floor, the loft, if you are doing works to the walls, maybe you could be insulating inside of the walls to some degree. But if you can upgrade the fabric of the building, then anything else following on that from that, the other upgrades like the low energy technologies, the solar panels, the ground source heat pumps, all those kind of things kind of follow on from that. But if you can do the kind of minimum amount, then yeah, it should be the windows and even putting secondary glazing in makes a huge difference.
And loft insulation.
And loft insulation.
Yeah. Great. Krista, have you got another question there?
I don't have one. Well, actually, I've got one, just another personal one. You talk about empathy in your presentation, and it's clear from you talking about and showing us your attention to detail, that sort of laser focus that you have. What sort of clients, like, I can imagine that not every client is kind of on board with that at the start, or is that just the client that you seek and find, or how do you build that empathy?
Well, it goes to the empathy is not just to the kind of crazy detailing, I would say. It's also how you use the house, how I always imagine myself in the house and how would I use it. Storage is super important. How do you make it look like clean without seeing all the mess everywhere? It's tons of storage. The flow of the building, of how you use it, how would you occupy it basically. And then, the detail, it can go to extremes, but it doesn't have to. I mean, we're not that crazy all the time. So it also depends on the clients of how they want to proceed. I mean, the Kenwood house, the client is also the builder, and he's slightly obsessed with detail as much as we are. So that was quite a great project to work on. But obviously the others, we do as much as we can to a budget that
budget's really important.
Yeah,
that's really important to say actually. And we've clearly shown some projects here that have had fairly large budgets. But absolutely, and you work with the client's budget, and it's managing those expectations from the outset, which is really key, regardless of what the number is. There's always a project to be done within a budget, and we're very attuned to that. And spending hard-earned post-tax money is a really big call, and you've got to think hard about how you do that. And it's a big responsibility for us to make sure that we're providing proper advice and doing it correctly. But it's, the empathy that we have with clients is aligned with the empathy we have with each other and for how we live our lives. We're fairly, other than the big glass roof, it's a fairly modest house. And it's, we understand how people live and what their needs are, and how people also change as well. So how kids grow. And we have 3 teenagers now, virtually. One's soon to be teenager.
11,
but the needs of kind of open plan living that was really great when they were young are completely different now. And everyone you want to shut them away, and they want their own little room, and they want a room that they can throw all their mates in. And it's kind of learning the hard way, but with the benefit of all that experience, we now help our clients understand the flexibility required in these houses for the whole life cycle all the way through. And also multi-generational living is also becoming much more popular as well. So, you've got to think about how that plays into people's lives as well.
And also how you could potentially change your house later on. If you want to stay in the same house and you want to think of how you could then divide it, maybe that's something that
it's that flexibility that we were talking about earlier. It's really key.
I suppose that comes back to the budget as well. You can almost convince people to spend that little bit extra if they know it's going to go further in their life, not just for the short term, but beyond that as well.
Yeah, there's often a discussion over capital investment up front versus how long they're going to stay in the house and whether it was worth it, because often there's a perception of over-capitalizing on their investment, that they won't ever get the return if they had to sell it in 2 or 3 years' time. And nobody can bank on a rising housing market anymore, where you could have done 10 years ago. Who knows what's around the corner at the moment? It's around certain times. Even though there has been a mini boom within particularly the London market over the last few months, I think that is a bit of a bubble from what I can see. And we'll see what happens next year. But it's, that investing people's money within their properties is really important, and people need to do it wisely. They can sometimes be a bit frivolous about it, which is fine. And other times they're being very sensible about it. And it's about making helping clients make those choices and decisions for themselves.
At both ends of the spectrum, not
both
just,
ends, absolutely.
Yeah.
Not just the people with houses in Islington, but the other end of the spectrum as well.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I mean, we work all over the place for all sorts of budgets and types of people, and private resi as well as developer-led residential stuff as well. So you get it. You get a kind of a knowledge from all different sectors to put back into houses, which is quite interesting.
Brilliant.
Another question that's just come from our audience, guys, is one of the projects you were talking on early in your presentation was about the prefabrication. So what are the reasons that you're looking for modern methods of construction on a project such as that?
MMC is a really interesting kind of sector, if you want to call it that. You do it for efficiencies and quality purposes primarily, and there can be some cost savings with it as well, depending on the scale of how you're implementing it. I think panelized systems, SIP systems, CLT have huge program advantages, even though potentially the capital cost may be slightly more because you're factory making something. The advantage of something being made in the factory is that you can control the quality, and you build it in a very, very controlled environment, like you might build a car. And I think actually that should be the way that a lot of construction works going forward. there's too much left to chance on site. There's too much kind of hand holding that's required often from throughout the whole process. And I think the more we can take off site, the better the quality should be. And the construction industry seems quite kind of antiquated when you compare it to other industries, like the car industry, for instance, where it's incredibly mechanized.
Yeah,
and I think that's really where I think a lot of things will be heading. There are massive advantages with modern methods construction, and programs certainly one of them.
Yeah, we're using it in office schemes as well. So
yeah, we're doing kind of prefabricated office pods and dropping them in. So the great advantage of that in that context is that there's minimal disruption to the rest of the office workers. You know, everything's built beside, just dropped in over the course of a few days. And the same could be applicable to houses. I mean, if you're doing a loft extension under the new PD regs, you can, you might be able to literally drop in an extension over the top of your house with minimal fuss to your neighbours, and that whole thing could be manufactured off site. So it's quite an exciting industry.
brilliant.
Any other questions there, Dean?
I've got no questions, mate. I think that's covered them all. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. That was really interesting. If anyone has any other questions or anything, please feel free to get in touch with us, or feel free to get in touch with Cousins & Cousins directly. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions.
And please do follow us. We Design Homes and Cousins and Cousins on Instagram as well. And we will hope to see you all back next Tuesday. Dean, that is Fred Gutfield, is that right, on Tuesday? And then Neil DeSheko on Thursday of next week. So we'd love to see you all come back and listen to those two presentations. So thank you very much, Ben and Jelena. That's been brilliant.
Thank you very much, guys. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.